Story 1, The Whispering Pizza. The night was stormy, rain pelting against my windows like a relentless drumbeat. I had just moved into a new apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and the eerie silence was unsettling. My empty stomach growled, and the idea of a warm, cheesy pizza was too tempting to resist. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number for Rocco's Pizza Haven, the local pizzeria. A gruff voice answered on the other end. "Rocco's Pizza Haven, what do you want?" I placed my order, a large pepperoni pizza with extra cheese, and the voice confirmed they'd have it delivered in about 30 minutes. I settled in, trying to distract myself from the unease the storm had stirred within me. Time passed slowly, and the storm outside only grew stronger. Thunder rattled the windows, and each lightning flash illuminated the room in eerie bursts. Just as I was beginning to regret my decision to order pizza on such a night, I heard a knock at the door. I jumped up, my heart racing with anticipation. The pizza delivery had come earlier than expected, but I was grateful for the distraction. I swung open the door, ready to greet the delivery person, but I was met with an empty hallway, darkness swallowing the dim light from my apartment. Confused, I stepped out into the hallway, looking left and right, but there was no sign of the delivery person or even their vehicle. Had they already left my pizza at the door? I checked, but there was nothing there. Then a sudden chill ran down my spine. A soft, eerie whisper filled the air, barely audible above the raging storm. It sounded like a child's voice, trembling with fear. "Help me!" My heart pounded as I turned to follow the voice. It seemed to be coming from the end of the hallway, where the darkness was thickest. As I walked closer, the whisper grew louder and more desperate, echoing in my ears. "Help me, please!" I reached the end of the hallway, and there, under the flickering light of a dying bulb, I saw a pizza box. It was battered and soggy from the rain, but it looked like the one I had ordered. I couldn't explain how it had ended up here, but I didn't want to leave it outside to get ruined. I picked up the box, and as I did, the whispering grew more intense, now forming words. "Open it." My hands trembled as I lifted the lid, and my heart stopped. Inside the box was not the hot, cheesy pizza I had ordered. Instead, it was filled with darkness, like a void that seemed to swallow the light from the hallway. I stared into the abyss, unable to look away. Then a skeletal hand, pale and withered, emerged from the darkness. It reached out towards me, bony fingers curling like claws. I stumbled back in horror, dropping the pizza box, which fell to the ground with a sickening thud. The hand continued to reach for me, inching closer and closer. I turned and ran back to my apartment, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart raced, and I felt like I was going to be sick. What had just happened? What had I seen? As I caught my breath, I heard a soft, mocking laughter coming from the hallway. It was a high-pitched, sinister chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. Then a voice, cold and malicious, spoke from the other side of the door. "You should have opened it." I backed away from the door, my mind racing. What was out there? What had I almost unleashed? I didn't have answers, but I knew I had narrowly escaped something truly horrifying. Hours passed, and the storm outside finally began to subside. I cautiously opened the door to my apartment, expecting to see some lingering darkness or hear that eerie whispering, but there was nothing. The hallway was empty and silent. I went back to my living room, still shaken by the encounter, and that's when I noticed something strange. A fresh, steaming pizza sat on my coffee table, a large pepperoni pizza with extra cheese. It looked exactly like the one I had ordered. Confusion and fear gnawed at me, but my hunger overcame my trepidation. I grabbed a slice and took a bite, and to my amazement, it was the most delicious pizza I had ever tasted. It was as if all my fears and worries melted away with each bite. As I finished the pizza, a sense of contentment washed over me. Maybe it had all been a bizarre dream or a figment of my imagination. I sighed in relief, feeling the weight of the night's events lifting from my shoulders. But then, as I reached for the last slice, something caught my eye. There, underneath the pizza, was a message scrawled in blood-red sauce. Bon appetit, Mark. I froze, my heart pounding once again. The unexpected ending had left me in a state of sheer terror. The pizza I had consumed was not what it seemed, and the sinister message hinted at a far more horrifying truth. The night was far from over, and the darkness that had lurked in the hallway still had its grip on me. Story 2, The Midnight Pizza Delivery. The night was pitch black, and a thick, ominous fog had settled over the town. I was a delivery driver for Sal's Pizzeria, a small, family-owned joint that was known for its delicious pizzas. It was a quiet Tuesday night, and I had a handful of deliveries to make before I could call it a day. I grabbed the last pizza box for the night, a large pepperoni with extra cheese, and headed out the door. The pizzeria was located on the outskirts of town, and my first stop was deep in the woods. The directions I had been given were vague, but the customer had promised a hefty tip if I could find their cabin. As I drove deeper into the forest, the fog seemed to grow thicker, and the trees closed in around me. The GPS on my phone started acting up, making it even harder to find my way. It was as if the woods were intentionally conspiring to keep me away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I spotted a dim light in the distance. It flickered like a dying candle, but it was enough to guide me. I followed the winding dirt road until I reached a small, dilapidated cabin. The place looked like it had been abandoned for years, and the only source of light came from a single, flickering lantern hanging by the door. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I had made a mistake, but the promise of a generous tip pushed me forward. I grabbed the pizza box and approached the cabin cautiously. The wind howled through the trees, and the air was so still that it sent shivers down my spine. I knocked on the door, and a sudden silence fell over the cabin. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my chest. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open slowly, revealing a figure cloaked in darkness. I couldn't make out any features, just a pair of piercing, ice-cold eyes. Without a word, the figure took the pizza box from my trembling hands and handed me a wad of cash. It was far more than I had expected, and I quickly stashed it in my pocket. Before I could say anything, the figure slammed the door shut, leaving me standing there in the eerie silence of the woods. I turned to leave, my heart still racing, when I heard a soft whisper in the wind. It was a name I couldn't quite make out. It sounded like a desperate plea, a cry for help. I shook it off as my imagination playing tricks on me and hurried back to my car. As I drove away from the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The fog seemed to grow thicker, and the winding dirt road stretched on endlessly. I had no idea which direction I was heading in, and panic started to creep in. That's when I heard it, a faint, eerie laughter echoing through the woods. It sent chills down my spine, and I instinctively hit the gas pedal, desperate to escape. But no matter how fast I drove, the laughter followed me, growing louder and more sinister with each passing moment. I was in a full-blown panic when I saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by my headlights. It was the same figure from the cabin, those piercing, ice-cold eyes fixed on me. I swerved to avoid hitting them, my car skidding dangerously on the slick road. I pulled over to catch my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I glanced in my rearview mirror, but the figure was nowhere to be seen. I knew I had to get out of those woods, and fast. I drove blindly, the fog swirling around my car like a shroud. The laughter still echoed in my ears, growing louder and more menacing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pursued by something malevolent, something that had no intention of letting me go. Just when I thought I couldn't take it any longer, the fog began to thin, and I saw the familiar lights of the town up ahead. I drove into the safety of the town, leaving the cursed woods behind. I quit my job at Sal's Pizzeria the next day, unable to shake the terror of that night. I never found out who the mysterious customer was or what had been haunting those woods, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never deliver another pizza in the dead of night, especially not to a cabin in the woods, no matter how tempting the tip. Story 3, Blackthorn Lane Nightmare. The sun had long since set, and a dense blanket of darkness shrouded the quiet town of Willowbrook. I was a college student struggling to make ends meet, and my part-time job as a pizza delivery driver was my lifeline. But this night would be different, a night I would never forget. I had just finished my shift at the pizzeria, and my boss, Mr. Grimaldi, had handed me one last delivery order. The address was bizarre, to say the least. 13 Blackthorn Lane, a street I had never heard of before. The thought of delivering to such an ominous-sounding place sent shivers down my spine, but the promise of a hefty tip was too tempting to resist. I hopped into my old, battered car and punched the address into my GPS. The device struggled to find the location, as if Blackthorn Lane didn't even exist. My unease grew as I drove deeper into the woods, my headlights casting eerie shadows on the twisted branches that clawed at the road. Eventually, I arrived at what appeared to be Blackthorn Lane, a narrow, winding path flanked by gnarled trees. It was nearly impossible to see anything beyond the reach of my headlights. The oppressive silence of the forest weighed heavily on me, and I couldn't help but feel that I was being watched. I followed the GPS's instructions, which led me to a decrepit and dilapidated house at the end of the lane. The place looked like it hadn't seen human activity in decades, with cracked windows, peeling paint, and a roof that sagged like an old man's back. I hesitated for a moment, but then decided to follow through with the delivery. The note on the order read, "Leave the pizza on the doorstep and knock 3 times. Do not wait." Clutching the pizza box tightly, I approached the front door. It creaked open on its own, revealing a pitch-black interior. The smell of decay and dampness filled the air. My heart pounded in my chest as I placed the pizza on the doorstep and knocked it 3 times as instructed. Before I could retreat, the door swung open, revealing a scene from my darkest nightmares. A dim, flickering light illuminated a room filled with strange, disturbing objects. Antique dolls with missing eyes, taxidermy animals posed in unnatural positions, and a series of framed photographs depicting people I couldn't identify. A shadowy figure stood at the center of the room, its back to me. It was hunched over, muttering incoherent words in a language I couldn't comprehend. I took a step back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Is everything okay?" I stammered, my voice trembling. The figure slowly turned to face me, and what I saw froze my blood. It was a woman, or at least it appeared to be. Her face was a grotesque mask of decay, her eyes empty sockets, and her mouth twisted into a wicked grin that stretched impossibly wide. Her bony fingers reached out towards me, and I felt an irresistible urge to run. I bolted from the house, sprinting down the winding lane, the pizza long forgotten. As I reached my car, I fumbled for my keys, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Just as I was about to start the engine, I heard a blood-curdling scream pierce the night. It was the woman from the house, and she was following me. I sped down the dark, winding road, my heart racing as I glanced in my rearview mirror. The woman was gaining on me, her twisted form moving with unnatural speed. Panic engulfed me as I realized there was no escape. I finally reached the edge of the woods and careened onto the main road, praying that someone, anyone, would come to my rescue. The headlights of another car appeared in the distance, and I flashed my high beams, desperate for help. The approaching car screeched to a halt, and a kid-faced woman stepped out, her phone already in hand, ready to call the police. I babbled incoherently about the pizza delivery and the woman from the house, but my words made little sense. The police arrived at the scene, and I led them back to Blackthorn Lane. But when we reached the house, it was empty, devoid of any signs of life or the strange objects that had filled it before. They searched the surrounding woods, but found nothing. No woman, no evidence of foul play, nothing to explain the horror I had witnessed. They looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and concern, but I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was making it all up. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night, but I know one thing for sure. I will never ever make a pizza delivery to 13 Blackthorn Lane again, and I pray that no one else has to.